Do you feel more tired after taking your break? Or no matter how many breaks you take, you're still drained whenever you get back to work? You're not alone. The problem isn't that you're taking breaks, it's how you're taking them. And this one mistake could have a surprisingly big effect on your productivity, output, and even overall enjoyment in life. In this video, I'll talk about why some breaks leave you drained, why boring breaks might be the productivity hack you've been missing, and lastly, how you can ease your way into implementing them to ultimately get more done and feel better doing it. If you're new here, I'm Marvin Payne, and before growing this channel to nearly 100k subscribers now, I worked as a full-time consultant at EY and I spent over a decade in the self-development space. From these experiences, I learned to build effective systems, manage my time efficiently, and execute effectively on my goals. Today, I coach entrepreneurs and professionals on everything from executing effectively to overcoming procrastination and distractions. If breaks are supposed to recharge you, why do some breaks leave us feeling even more drained? To help you understand the answer, let me first introduce you to Dr. Anna Lembke, a psychiatrist and the author of Dopamine Nation, and her concept of the pleasure-pain balance. Imagine a scale with pleasure on the left side and pain on the right side. When you indulge in something pleasurable, like eating chocolate or checking your phone, dopamine is released in your reward pathway, tipping the scale toward the pleasure side. But here's the catch. Our brain wants the scale to be balanced, at equilibrium, in homeostasis. To bring the scale back to balance, the brain kicks in powerful self-regulating mechanisms like cutting back on dopamine production or makes the dopamine receptors less sensitive. But the brain doesn't just bring the scale back to balance, it tips it further until it reaches the equal and opposite amount before going back to homeostasis. When it tips further, that is when you're in a temporary dopamine deficit. And that is when you feel drained and low in motivation. Here, you often start craving another piece of chocolate to get yourself out of this uncomfortable state. But here's the dangerous part. If you indulge in your cravings in this state, you're going to need more to feel the same pleasure you felt in the first place. This is also called increased tolerance or neuroadaptation. This leads to the brain cutting back even more dopamine or make the dopamine receptors even less sensitive to restore balance, leaving you in an even more drained state. What most people are not aware of is that if you just waited the first time, the brain would have just naturally restored the balance. If we bring this back to taking breaks, most of us instinctively turn to social media or other highly stimulating activities during our breaks. These activities overstimulate our brains, flooding them with dopamine and tipping the scale hard toward pleasure. Naturally, our brain wants to tip the scale back, producing less dopamine and often leaving us with a dopamine base level lower than when we first took the break. That's why when you come back to work after scrolling Instagram or TikTok, you feel more drained. So, if overstimulating breaks leave us feeling drained, what kind of break should we take instead? Well, let's look at the pleasure-pain balance again. Instead of scrolling social media, flooding our brains with dopamine and tipping the scale hard toward pleasure, what if we just did nothing? What if we took a boring break or a clean break instead? What if we just took a walk, sat down and did nothing, stared into space, or just daydreamed? So instead of wasting your dopamine, you're saving it for when you come back to work. But not only that, during a boring break, you're actually allowing your brain to continue its natural process of producing dopamine at its baseline rate, gradually refilling your reserves. Additionally, a boring break might actually tip the scale a bit towards pain, leading the brain to counteract by producing more dopamine to tip the scale with an equal and opposite amount, making you even more motivated and feeling better after your break. So how do you actually implement boring breaks without feeling overwhelmed? Going cold turkey and cutting out all social media breaks might sound appealing at first, but that will likely be too much of a change for most people. Here's what I did. I transitioned through something I like to call baby steps. In week 1 of my plan, my goal was to just make my first break of the day a boring break. No scrolling, no stimulation. For the rest of my breaks, I allowed myself to do whatever I wanted. In week 2 of the plan, I took it a step further. Now my first 2 breaks of the day had to be boring breaks. Over time, I kept building on this. Now, most mornings before lunch, my breaks are entirely boring breaks. I use lunch as a time to go on social media guilt-free, and in the afternoon, I allow myself 1 to 2 social media breaks during my second work session. So you see how I baby step my way into implementing boring breaks. Be flexible and make it work for your routine. Even small changes can make a big difference in how refreshed and productive you feel throughout the day. But boring breaks are just one piece of the productivity puzzle. To get the most out of your day and week, you also need to know how to plan your week effectively. And I'll break it down step by step in this video over here.